By the time Elias Ward reached the eastern trench of Vaelor 9, the planet's pale sun had already begun sinking behind mountains of fused metal. It was the kind of place sensible people avoided, which was precisely why scavengers loved it. 8 centuries of warfare had left enough buried machinery beneath the grey soil to make a patient man rich, provided the radiation, collapsing ruins, automated mines, or competing scavengers did not kill him first. Elias considered those acceptable working conditions. His survey drone disagreed. Environmental hazard probability, 68%, the little machine announced as it floated beside his shoulder. Elias adjusted the respirator hanging beneath his chin. That means 32% safe. That is not how risk assessment works. That's why you're the drone and I'm management. The drone emitted a disappointed electronic chirp. The battlefield stretched for kilometers around him, filled with shattered alien walkers and the blackened ribs of ancient warships. Their hulls had been partially swallowed by centuries of dust, yet faint blue currents still occasionally crawled through exposed conduits when electrical storms passed overhead. Most scavengers searched the obvious wreckage. Elias preferred places everyone else had ignored. His scanner began clicking beside a collapsed monument. He stopped. Metallic object detected. Depth, 2.4 meters. Value? Unknown. Elias smiled. Unknown was usually better than worthless. 20 minutes of digging revealed a narrow chamber beneath the monument. Elias squeezed through the opening and dropped onto a floor coated in metallic ash. His lamp illuminated faded symbols along the walls, some shaped like stars surrounded by curved blades. He recognized them vaguely from museum broadcasts concerning the old Vaelor dynastic wars, though archaeology had never interested him unless archaeologists were willing to purchase what he found. At the center of the chamber rested a stone pedestal. On it lay a sword. Elias stared at it. The weapon was perhaps a meter long, covered completely in reddish-black corrosion. Nothing glowed. Nothing floated. No holograms appeared dramatically from the ceiling. This, Elias said, is what nearly broke my scanner. His drone hovered closer. Estimated resale value is extremely low. How low? Approximately 1 inexpensive meal. Elias lifted an eyebrow. Without beverage. Cruel. He almost left it there. Then he noticed something strange. The dust surrounding the pedestal had accumulated everywhere except directly beneath the sword. More importantly, the scanner insisted that the object contained a power source, despite showing no detectable battery, reactor, or energy cell. Elias reached toward the handle. The drone immediately said, "Touching unidentified ancient technology is discouraged. You said it was worth dinner." I revised my assessment after observing your expression. My expression? The expression you display immediately before making poor decisions. Elias wrapped his fingers around the grip. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the sword moved. A vibration passed through his hand, so faint he initially thought it was his pulse. A thin line of blue light appeared beneath the corrosion. Another followed it. Then dozens. Elias froze. Oh. The rust cracked. Fragments lifted away from the blade instead of falling, hanging weightlessly in the air like reddish sparks. Beneath them emerged smooth black-silver metal so perfect it reflected Elias's startled face. Lines of brilliant blue energy raced from the handle toward the tip. Symbols illuminated across the chamber walls. His drone backed away. I recommend releasing the object. I am attempting to look brave. You are failing. The last layer of corrosion vanished in a burst of luminous particles. The weapon hummed, not loudly, almost pleasantly. Somewhere deep beneath the battlefield, something answered. A tremendous vibration rolled through the ground. Elias stumbled against the pedestal as buried mechanisms awakened kilometer after kilometer beneath the ruins. Ancient towers, previously mistaken for broken monuments, began unfolding from the landscape. Blue lights appeared across the horizon. His scanner suddenly filled with signals. Hundreds, then thousands. Elias looked slowly at the sword. I think dinner just became complicated. A new sound rolled across the sky. Engines. He climbed quickly from the chamber and emerged into the evening light, just as 3 enormous spacecraft pierced the clouds overhead. Their silver hulls carried the crest of the Vaelor royal dynasty. The ships descended around the ruins with terrifying precision. Armored soldiers poured from their ramps, forming a circle around him. Energy rifles rose simultaneously. Elias lifted his free hand. "Before anyone becomes unreasonable," he said, "I found it like this." The soldiers parted. A woman walked between them. She looked almost human, tall and elegant, with pale features and long ears rising gracefully through silver-blonde hair. A dark ceremonial cloak moved behind her as she crossed the dust. A narrow crystalline crown rested above her brow. Elias recognized her immediately. Queen Seralyth. Her gaze passed over him, then she saw the sword. The queen stopped. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The color drained from her face. When she finally looked into Elias's eyes, there was no anger in hers, only disbelief. "Where," she whispered, "did you get Vaelor's sword?" Elias looked from the queen to the weapon in his hand, then back to the ring of soldiers surrounding him. "Vaelor's sword," he repeated. "I was told it was worth 1 meal." His drone floated slightly higher. "Correction, 1 inexpensive meal." Several soldiers tightened their grips on their rifles. Queen Seralyth did not appear to hear the joke. Her eyes remained fixed on the blade, following the blue energy that moved through its dark metal like liquid lightning. Slowly she stepped closer. That weapon disappeared 873 years ago. Elias glanced down at it. "Well, technically it was under about 2 meters of dirt, so I wouldn't call that disappearing. More like aggressive storage." This time one of the younger soldiers almost smiled, though the expression vanished when his commander looked at him. Seralyth stopped an arm's length away. The long ears rising through her pale hair twitched almost imperceptibly as she studied the symbols glowing around the hilt. "Release it." "Gladly." Elias opened his fingers. Nothing happened. The sword remained against his palm. He frowned and shook his hand. The weapon moved with him. "That," Elias muttered, "is new." One of the royal guards stepped forward. "Your Majesty, allow me." Before Elias could protest, the guard grasped the handle. A pulse of blue light erupted from the weapon. The soldier flew backward as though struck by an invisible hammer, landed several meters away, and slid through the ash with a metallic screech. Every rifle in the circle snapped toward Elias. "I did not do that," Elias said immediately. His drone rotated toward the fallen guard. "Technically, the object you are holding did." "You are not helping." Seralyth raised one hand. "Lower your weapons." The soldiers hesitated, then obeyed. The fallen guard sat up, dazed but apparently unharmed. Blue sparks crawled harmlessly across his armor before vanishing. Seralyth's expression had changed. The disbelief was still there, but now Elias saw something else beneath it. Fear. She turned toward one of her officers. "Prepare the containment chamber aboard the Sovereign Dawn." The officer stared at Elias. "For the weapon?" Seralyth's gaze shifted to him. "For both." Elias sighed. "There it is. I knew the luxurious imprisonment portion of the evening was coming." Minutes later he stood inside the Queen's flagship, surrounded by walls of polished alloy and transparent displays flowing with alien script. The containment laboratory was larger than his entire workshop. Scientists moved around him with scanners while the sword rested calmly in his hand, as though it had not just awakened an ancient battlefield and assaulted royalty. Seralyth stood behind a transparent energy barrier. "My family has searched for that weapon for generations," she said. "Vaelor carried it when he united the first colonies and ended the War of 9 Suns. After his death, it vanished." "And nobody could activate it?" "No one." A scientist approached with a neural scanner. "According to the oldest records, the weapon recognizes only its rightful bearer." Elias looked at Seralyth, then at himself. His coat was torn, His boots were covered in ash, and there was dried lubricant across one sleeve. I feel I should point out that I am currently wearing 3 different socks. The scientist blinked. 1 pair and 1 emergency sock, Elias explained. Seralyth finally allowed the faintest smile. The scientists tried everything: genetic scans, resonance probes, magnetic isolation fields. One brave technician even touched the blade with a robotic arm. The sword ignored them all. Then Elias noticed a small symbol near the guard. It had not been there before. He pressed it. The laboratory went dark. A collective gasp moved through the room. "That's bad, isn't it?" Elias whispered. Stars erupted around them. A holographic map expanded across the chamber, thousands of systems suspended in blue light. At its center appeared Vaelor 9. From there, a red line stretched toward an uncharted region beyond the Empire. The sword vibrated. An ancient artificial voice filled the laboratory. "Bearer recognized." Seralyth's smile vanished. Every scientist stopped moving. The voice continued. "Human neural architecture confirmed." Elias felt a cold pressure settle in his stomach. Seralyth stepped closer to the barrier. Then came the final words. "Final directive incomplete. Custodian required." The hologram disappeared. Silence returned. Elias stared at the sword. Seralyth stared at him. Slowly, Elias raised one eyebrow. "I suppose this is the part where you tell me humans weren't supposed to be here 800 years ago." Seralyth's face had gone pale again. "They weren't." Elias had expected interrogation rooms to be uglier. The chamber assigned to him aboard the Sovereign Dawn contained a transparent wall overlooking the capital planet below, a bed that adjusted itself to his body temperature, and a table capable of producing 18 varieties of tea. It also had 6 armed guards outside the door. "So this is hospitality?" Elias asked when Seralyth entered. "By royal standards." He nodded toward the guards. "And the decorative infantry?" "They are there for your protection." "From whom?" Seralyth's expression tightened. "That is what I intend to discover." Since the sword had spoken the words, "human neural architecture confirmed," the atmosphere aboard the flagship had changed. Scientists whispered when Elias entered. Officers stared at him as though he had stepped out of a historical nightmare. Seralyth herself had become quieter. The Queen's human-like features remained composed, but the long ears rising through her silver-blonde hair gave away small signs of tension whenever the weapon activated. Elias sat at the table while the sword rested beside him. "Tell me about Vaelor," he said. Seralyth looked toward the weapon. "He founded the first unified Vaeran dynasty. Before him, our colonies were divided among warlords. He ended centuries of conflict and created the laws that still govern us." "Sounds exhausting." "He is considered sacred." "That sounds even more exhausting." Seralyth's mouth twitched. It was the first time Elias had seen her almost laugh without trying to hide it. "You treat everything lightly," she said. "Only things that might kill me." "That seems backwards." "It keeps morale unpredictable." For the next several hours, Seralyth showed him archival records stored inside floating holographic panels. Images of Vaelor appeared above the table, tall, armored, carrying the same sword Elias had found. In every surviving image, the weapon's core glowed blue. Then Elias noticed something. "Stop!" Seralyth froze the projection. Behind Vaelor stood several armored figures. Their faces had been blurred, not damaged by time. Erased. Elias leaned closer. "Why would someone edit this?" Seralyth frowned. "These records were restored from fragments." "No." Elias pointed to the distortion. "See the edge pattern? That's intentional masking." Seralyth stared at him. "You can tell?" "I repair corrupted navigation logs for people too cheap to buy legal software." "That is oddly specific." It is also most of my income. Elias reached for the sword. The moment his fingertips touched the hilt, the weapon pulsed. A new symbol appeared. He pressed it. Seralyth started to say, "Perhaps you should stop pressing." The archive exploded into light. A hidden recording appeared. Vaelor stood inside an unfamiliar laboratory. Beside him was another figure. Human. The recording flickered, but the proportions were unmistakable. Round ears. Human facial structure. A voice spoke through heavy interference. Neural interface stable. Custodian authorization accepted. Seralyth went completely still. Elias stared at the image. That man is human. Yes. 8 centuries ago. Yes. Before humanity had interstellar travel. I am aware. Elias rubbed his face. I dislike history. The sword suddenly emitted a sharp tone. Every light in the room turned red. Seralyth moved before Elias understood what was happening. She grabbed his coat and pulled him sideways. A beam of white energy punched through the transparent wall behind him. The table exploded. The tea machine died heroically. Elias hit the floor. That was the good tea machine! Seralyth drew a compact weapon from beneath her cloak and fired toward the doorway. A cloaked figure appeared briefly in the corridor, then vanished behind a distortion field. The guards outside shouted. Another blast struck the room. Seralyth pushed Elias behind a structural column. Stay down. I was planning to. The sword suddenly activated in his hand. A curved field of blue energy formed around them. The next shot struck it and dissolved into sparks. Seralyth stared at the barrier. Elias stared too. I didn't do that either. The attacker fled before the guards could seal the corridor. Minutes later, the chamber was filled with soldiers and security drones. Seralyth stood among the wreckage, her face colder than Elias had yet seen. Only senior personnel knew which chamber you were in. Elias looked at the destroyed wall. So someone aboard your ship wants me dead? Yes. He looked at the sword. Because of this? Seralyth's gaze moved to the frozen image of Vaelor beside the ancient human. No, she said quietly. Because of what it remembers. The coordinates hidden inside Vaelor's sword led them back to Vaelor 9 2 nights later, although this time Seralyth refused to bring an entire royal fleet. Someone inside my government knew where you were being held, she said as their small stealth vessel descended beneath a storm layer. If I announce where we are going, we may as well send our enemies an invitation. Elias tightened the harness across his chest as turbulence shook the cabin. Could we at least make it a polite invitation? Food, music, fewer assassins? Across from him, Seralyth raised one eyebrow. You joke whenever you are nervous. Incorrect. Sometimes I joke because everyone else is being painfully serious. Only 4 trusted soldiers accompanied them. Their ship landed 20 kilometers from the battlefield, beyond the range of the newly awakened sensors. The night air was filled with electrical dust, tiny metallic particles flashing whenever lightning crossed the sky. Elias carried the sword wrapped beneath his coat, though hiding a legendary energy weapon beneath second-hand scavenger clothing felt, to him, like disguising a reactor with a blanket. The sword guided them. Every few hundred meters, a blue symbol appeared across its surface, rotating toward a particular direction. Eventually, they reached a canyon Elias had crossed dozens of times without noticing anything unusual. Seralyth stopped. There is nothing here. That describes most of my professional discoveries immediately before they become dangerous. He raised the sword. A beam emerged from its tip and struck the canyon wall. Stone vanished. Not shattered. Vanished. Behind it stood a seamless black doorway nearly 30 meters high. Nobody spoke. Elias glanced at Seralyth. You people hide things aggressively. The queen approached the door. Ancient symbols ignited around her, scanning her face, eyes, blood chemistry, and genetic structure. A voice spoke. "Dynastic sequence verified." Nothing opened. Then Elias stepped forward. A second light passed across him. "Custodian architecture verified." The doorway split apart. Warm blue illumination poured from beyond it. Seralyth looked at Elias. "So it requires both of us." "That sounds inconveniently symbolic." They entered. The facility beneath Vaelor 9 was enormous. Platforms floated over bottomless shafts. Transparent conduits carried streams of luminous particles through the walls. Machines that had slept for 8 centuries awakened as they passed, unfolding like metallic flowers. At the center of the complex stood a spherical chamber containing thousands of suspended crystals. A figure formed inside them, an old man made entirely of light. Seralyth's soldiers immediately raised their weapons. The hologram sighed. 800 years asleep, it said, and the first greeting I receive is armed paranoia. Elias lowered his own empty hands. "I like him already." The figure turned. "Human." Then toward Seralyth. "Vaelor bloodline." The Queen stepped forward. "Identify yourself." "I am Orin, archival intelligence of the First Accord." Seralyth froze. "The First Accord does not exist in our history." "Yes," Orin replied. "That was intentional." The crystals around them illuminated. Images appeared. Vaelor stood beside humans. Not one, dozens. Engineers, pilots, scientists. Their primitive vessel floated behind them, its hull visibly human but surrounded by unfamiliar gravitational distortions. Elias stared. Orin explained that centuries before official first contact, an experimental human ship had accidentally crossed an unstable spatial fracture. Its survivors reached Vaeron space during the War of 9 Suns. One engineer helped Vaelor create the sword, not as a ceremonial weapon, but as a neural command interface. Seralyth's voice became barely audible. "My dynasty was founded with human assistance." "Yes." "And this was erased?" "By those who preferred mythology to complicated truth." Elias folded his arms. "History does hate inconvenient technicians." Orin turned toward him. "You are not Vaelor's heir." "Good. I was worried somebody was about to give me a crown." "You are compatible with the custodian interface, because the system was designed around human neural architecture." Elias looked down at the sword. "So it did not choose me because I am special?" "No." Seralyth smiled slightly. Elias frowned at her. "That answer pleased you far too much." Then every light in the facility changed from blue to red. Orin's expression hardened. A planetary diagram appeared above them. Beneath the capital, something massive began glowing. "Warning," Orin said. Seralyth stepped closer. "What is that?" "The primary Vaelor defense network." Elias felt the humor leave him. Orin continued. "It has been dormant for 869 years. A red pulse appeared at the center of the hologram. It began receiving activation commands 12 days ago. Seralyth stared at the capital displayed above them. "From whom?" Orin looked directly at her. "From inside your royal palace." The capital looked peaceful from orbit, which Elias decided was suspicious. Cities that peaceful usually hid either excellent public transportation or catastrophic political secrets. The Sovereign Dawn remained beyond the main traffic lanes, while Seralyth returned in a smaller shuttle with Elias and only 2 trusted guards. Officially, the Queen was still conducting inspections on Vaelor 9. Unofficially, she was entering her own palace like a thief. "This is absurd," Elias whispered as they crossed a maintenance platform beneath the western tower. "You own this building." Seralyth pulled the hood of her cloak farther over her silver-blonde hair and long ears. "Ownership becomes complicated when half your advisors may be plotting a coup." "I have had landlords like that." Oren had traced the activation signals to a restricted military archive beneath the palace. Only 6 people possessed clearance high enough to access it. 5 were generals, ministers, and royal scientists. The 6th was Chancellor Mayroth. Seralyth had gone silent when she saw the name. Mayroth had served her mother. He had taught Seralyth statecraft when she was a child, advised her during 2 wars, and stood beside her during her coronation. Elias noticed the way her jaw tightened. "You trust him?" "I did." "That is worse." "Yes." The hidden archive lay behind an antique ceremonial hall where holographic statues of former rulers watched from alcoves. Elias found it deeply uncomfortable to sneak beneath the glowing eyes of dead monarchs. "One of them is judging me," he whispered. "They are recordings. The 3rd one definitely disapproves of my boots." Seralyth almost smiled. Then the sword activated beneath Elias's coat. A line of blue light slid along the wall. A concealed door opened. Beyond it, rows of crystalline data cores pulsed in darkness. Elias connected his portable reader to one of them. Information spilled across the display. False fleet movements. Fabricated invasion reports. Defense platform command sequences. Seralyth read in silence. "This is enough to declare martial law across 6 systems." "That appears to be the idea." A second file opened. It contained genetic research on the sword. Elias's name appeared at the top. His stomach tightened. "They knew about me before the attack." A voice answered from behind them. "Yes." They turned. Chancellor Mayroth stood in the doorway with 12 armed soldiers. He was older than Elias expected, thin and elegant, with grey hair swept behind long ears. His expression carried no triumph, only disappointment. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "you should have left history buried." Seralyth stepped in front of Elias. "You ordered the assassination." "I ordered the destruction of a destabilizing threat." "He is a person." "He is proof." Mayroth gestured toward the sword. "Do you understand what happens if the Empire learns Vaelor depended upon humans? The sacred continuity of your dynasty collapses. Every separatist system will claim your throne is built on fraud." Seralyth's voice hardened. "So your answer is to manufacture a war?" "My answer is stability." Elias leaned toward Seralyth. "Politicians always make terrifying words sound boring." Mayroth looked at him. "You think this is amusing?" "No, I think you are." The Chancellor's soldiers advanced. Elias reached for the sword. Mayroth raised a device. A pulse struck him. Every muscle in Elias's body locked. He collapsed. The sword fell from his hand and immediately went dark. Seralyth fired first. Blue bolts tore across the archive. Her guards returned fire. For several seconds the chamber became chaos, crystalline shelves exploding into glittering fragments, while defense drones descended from the ceiling. Then someone struck Seralyth from behind. Darkness swallowed Elias. When he woke, he was kneeling in the imperial court. Hundreds of nobles filled the galleries. The sword rested inside a containment field beside him. Mayroth stood before the throne. "Elias Ward," he announced, "is charged with theft of the sacred weapon of Vaelor, infiltration of royal systems, and conspiracy against the crown." Elias looked around. "That sounds impressive for someone who was digging through garbage 3 days ago." No one laughed. Then the great doors opened. Seralyth entered. Her face was bruised, her cloak was torn, but she walked directly to the throne. Mayroth bowed. "Your Majesty, under imperial law, the sentence is death." Silence filled the chamber. Seralyth looked at Elias, then at the nobles, then at Mayroth. She slowly removed her crown. Gasps moved through the court. Seralyth descended the steps and stood beside Elias. "If discovering the truth is treason," she said, her voice carrying through the entire hall, "then your queen will commit treason with him." For the first time, Mayroth's calm expression broke. The court erupted before Mayroth could answer. Some nobles shouted that Seralyth had been compromised. Others demanded Elias be executed immediately. And somewhere in the confusion, an elderly minister fainted with enough theatrical precision that Elias suspected he had practiced. Seralyth did not move from his side. Her crown remained on the floor behind her, gleaming beneath the throne lights. Myeroth stared at it, as though she had dropped an explosive device. "You would throw away 8 centuries of legitimacy for him?" he asked. Seralyth's long ears angled back slightly. "No. I would throw away 8 centuries of lies for the truth." Elias glanced toward her. "That sounded expensive." "Be quiet." "Gladly." Then the palace shook. A deep metallic vibration rolled upward through the floor. Every holographic banner vanished. Red emergency symbols replaced them. An artificial voice thundered through the chamber. "Vaelor Defense Network active." Myeroth's face changed. Not surprise. Satisfaction. Seralyth saw it too. "You already started it." "I gave the first command 12 days ago," he replied. "Your refusal merely made the final stage necessary." Outside the transparent dome above the court, the sky filled with movement. Ancient defense platforms rose from beneath the city, unfolding into black geometric structures. Orbital weapons rotated toward the atmosphere, while enormous machines climbed from sealed underground vaults. Panic shattered the court. Myeroth's soldiers moved toward Elias. The sword suddenly ignited inside its containment field. Blue light tore through the barrier. The weapon flew across the chamber and slammed into Elias's palm. "I am beginning to appreciate its timing." Seralyth grabbed his arm. "Run!" They escaped through a service corridor beneath the throne, while loyal guards delayed Myeroth's forces. The sword projected a map over Elias's wrist, guiding them downward through levels no modern blueprint recorded. "What are we looking for?" Seralyth asked. The place where somebody thought burying a planetary superweapon beneath a capital city was sensible. That does narrow it down surprisingly little. The passage ended above a shaft stretching kilometers into darkness. A platform awakened beneath them and dropped. Too quickly. Elias gripped the railing. "I hate ancient elevators. You entered a battlefield ruin alone. Bad elevators are more personal." They descended into a cavern large enough to contain a city. At its center rotated a sphere of black metal, surrounded by rings of blue energy. The sword spoke. "Primary command nexus detected." A holographic version of Orin appeared beside them. "You have reached the first Accord control core." Seralyth stared upward. "Can we shut it down?" "Not individually." 2 interfaces rose from the floor. One glowed blue, the other silver. Orin pointed toward Elias. "Custodian authorization." Then toward Seralyth. "Dynastic authorization." Elias frowned. "So the weapon was designed so no single ruler could control all of this?" "Correct." A distant explosion shook the chamber. Myeroth appeared on the upper platform with armed soldiers. "You misunderstand Vaelor's intention," he called down. "Power exists to preserve order." Seralyth stepped toward the silver interface. "And who decides what order means?" "The one strong enough to maintain it." Myeroth's soldiers opened fire. Elias raised the sword. A blue shield spread across the platform, while Seralyth placed both hands against the interface. "Elias!" He thrust the sword into the custodian's socket. The entire cavern came alive. Billions of data fragments rushed through his mind. Cities, weapons, ancient battlefields. Then one final recording. Vaelor appeared between them. His voice echoed through the core. "No ruler, no dynasty, no species must possess absolute command. If the sword awakens again, let truth be the final defense." Elias understood. The network had never been designed merely to fire weapons. It was an archive. He looked at Seralyth. She understood too. "Do it," she said. Together they activated the final directive. Across the Empire, every screen, military channel, Civilian network and orbital relay turned blue. The erased history appeared. Humans beside Vaelor. The first accord. The creation of the sword. The deliberate falsification of the royal myth. Seralyth shouted, "Stop it!" But it was too late. His soldiers lowered their weapons. Above the planet, defense platforms shut down one by one. Orbital cannons folded into silence. Seralyth stared at Seralyth. "You have destroyed your own throne." Seralyth stepped toward him. "No." She looked at the historical records shining across the cavern. "I have finally made it mine." Elias pulled the sword from the interface. The alarms stopped. For several seconds there was only silence. Then he looked around at the gigantic machines, the unconscious guards, the disgraced chancellor, and the queen standing beside him. "So," Elias said, "about the payment for that rusty sword." Seralyth laughed. Not politely, not quietly. For the first time since he had met her, she laughed like someone who had finally survived something impossible. 3 months after the fall of Seralyth, Vaelor looked different. Not physically. The same silver towers still rose above the capital. The same orbital lanes glowed at night as transport vessels crossed the atmosphere. The same ancient monuments stood in the royal district. But now people stopped beneath them and asked questions. Historians opened sealed archives. Universities argued over the first accord. Children learned that Vaelor had not built an empire alone, and that forgotten humans had once stood beside him when the galaxy was still divided by war. To Elias's surprise, civilization did not collapse. There were protests, political arguments. Several governors demanded investigations. One noble reportedly threw a chair through a council window. Elias considered that healthy democratic engagement. Seralyth was imprisoned after a public trial. The officers who supported him were removed, while those who had lowered their weapons in the command chamber were pardoned after investigation. Seralyth dissolved the secret order that had guarded the false version of history for centuries. And Elias discovered that becoming famous was considerably worse than being shot at. Reporters waited outside his residence. Scholars sent him 12-page questions. A merchant tried to sell miniature replicas of Vaelor's sword with Elias's face printed on the packaging. He bought one. "It looks nothing like me," he told Seralyth. They were walking through the royal hangar, where a small exploration vessel waited beneath suspended maintenance drones. Seralyth examined the toy. "It has your hair." "It has too much hair." "That is probably why it sells." Elias gave her an offended look. She smiled. He had grown accustomed to that smile. In the beginning, Seralyth had been a queen surrounded by soldiers, suspicion, and impossible history. Now she sometimes arrived at his workshop without guards, carrying tea, and pretending she needed technological advice. Elias had stopped pretending not to notice. The Empire had offered him land, wealth, military rank, and a ceremonial title containing 17 words. He refused all of it. Instead, he accepted one position: Royal Custodian of Pre-Imperial Technology, mostly because it gave him legal permission to open things marked "Do Not Open." His first official expedition brought him back to Vaelor 9. The battlefield was quiet when he and Seralyth returned to the chamber where he had found the sword. The pedestal still stood beneath centuries of ash. Elias placed the weapon upon it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then blue light spread through the chamber. A final hologram appeared. Vaelor stood before them, older than in the previous recordings, tired. Human engineers could be seen behind him, preparing a vessel. "If this message is found," Vaelor said, "then someone has uncovered what we failed to preserve." Seralyth stepped closer. Vaelor continued, "Power does not belong to those who inherit it, nor to those who discover it." His image looked toward the sword. "It belongs only temporarily to those willing to protect others from it." Elias lowered his eyes. Months earlier, he would have laughed. He would have taken the sword to the highest bidder, bought a larger ship, and forgotten Vaelor existed. Now he understood why the weapon had frightened him after it awakened. It had not given him power. It had given him responsibility. Vaelor's image faded, but the chamber remained active. A new projection appeared. Stars. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. Seralyth inhaled sharply. This was not in Orin's archive. Elias stepped into the hologram. Several systems were marked with the old human custodian symbol. Colonies? He asked. Perhaps, Seralyth said. The sword pulsed. A route extended beyond known space. Elias stared at it for a long time. Then he laughed softly. What? He looked at Seralyth. I spent 10 years searching ruins for something valuable. And? I finally found it. Her gaze moved toward the sword. Elias shook his head. Not that. He looked toward the star map, then at her. Seralyth's long ears slowly turned red. You are becoming dangerously sentimental. I blame royal influence. She reached for his hand. He let her take it. Above them, ancient systems buried beneath Vaelor awakened one after another. Not weapons, beacons. Across the dead battlefield, towers that had slept for centuries projected pillars of blue light into the sky, each aligned with another forgotten world. Elias watched them through the chamber opening. His drone floated beside him. Probability of expedition survival, 41%. Elias smiled. That high? Your standards remain concerning. Seralyth laughed. Together they walked toward the waiting ship. Behind them, Vaelor's sword rested on Elias's back, no longer a relic, no longer a mystery, and no longer merely his. Ahead waited worlds erased from history, answers humanity had forgotten, and perhaps people who still remembered the first accord. Elias entered the ship beside the Queen. The engines ignited. As Vaelor 9 disappeared beneath them, he realized that picking up one worthless piece of rusted metal had ended his old life completely. For once, he did not miss it.